This video is brought to you by Hexbound, a witchy supplement for 5e by Hit Point Press on Kickstarter now. Hello and welcome back to the Gallant Goblin. Today is the day I've been waiting for. We have the first booster set of pre-painted minis from WizKids for Starfinder by Paizo. This is Starfinder Battles Planets of Peril. Many thanks to WizKids for sending this to us to review. If you're not familiar with Starfinder, this will be a great video to start getting acquainted with the universe. So, Pathfinder spun off of Dungeons & Dragons several years ago. They share a lot of the same DNA with goblins and kobolds and dragons and adventurers. Pathfinder just has its own lore with a different spin on the common fantasy tropes, but that lore is pretty extensive. Now, Starfinder spun off of Pathfinder just a couple of years ago and takes the Pathfinder universe a couple of thousand years into the future. So there are still goblins, and they still behave like goblins, but now they're space goblins, and instead of playing with fire and torches, they play with laser pistols and grenades. Now, we had a few preset packages of pre-painted Starfinder minis from WizKids last year, but this is our first full booster set. Man, it's Starfinder, so let's do another giveaway. To win a booster box of Starfinder Battles, Planets of Peril when it releases, all you have to do is be a subscriber to our channel here, and let me know in the comment section down below which of these minis is your favorite and how you might use it in your games. Now, keep in mind, lots of these monsters also appear in Pathfinder too. You can certainly use many of these figures in your Pathfinder and D&D games as well, but I don't know, I can't wait anymore. Let's just open these boxes up and see what's inside. I don't want to give too much information about the Jinsul here because they're important to the story of the Starfinder Society's first season. So if you are playing that season, I would maybe look into getting a few of these. Also, that season's plot was pretty interesting. Anyway, the Jinsul are chitinous, warlike creatures who hail from the vast, which you can think of as deep space. They have their own ships and space stations, which you probably don't want to visit because along with their powerful bites, they also frequently augment themselves with technology, and some wield impressive technomancer magic. You can find two stat blocks, one CR1 and the other CR5 in Alien Archive 3. So, dying in the vacuum of space isn't fun. Those unfortunate creatures sometimes find the extreme suffering caused by exposure to space prevents their soul from moving on to the afterlife. They rise again as monstrosities known as Nihilis. They are surprisingly intelligent and actually create their own gravity, which allows them to cling to the hulls of passing ships. You can find a CR5 Nihili and a CR13 Nihili captain stat block in Alien Archive 1. The Electrovore may be one of the first enemies your players will ever face if they start their journeys with the Starfinder Beginner Box. They are CR2 creatures from Alien Archive 1. What rats were to old sailing ships, Electrovores are to the current day starships. They gain sustenance from electrical currents, whether they be flowing through machines or biological neurons. If your party does find some stowing away on their ship after docking at a seedy space station, for instance, they can at least be happy that they'll be able to turn the Electrovores into fashionable and useful gloves after defeating them. There's also a handy chart telling you how long it'll take the Electrovores to disable a system on a starship if left unchecked. There are a huge variety of SROs, or sentient robotic organisms, in the galaxy, in all shapes and sizes. Like Starfinder androids, their advanced positronic brains attract souls, and their lives are their own, with true artificial intelligence and free will. Unlike androids, they don't have a unified appearance and can look like anything, really. They are most common on the Pact World's planet of Abalon, and while they are considered full Pact World citizens, they often face discrimination. They are playable with very interesting traits. You can choose to create either a medium or small SRO as your PC. You can learn more about them and see their playable stats in the Starfinder Pact World sourcebook. The Skittermander is the unofficial mascot of Starfinder. These relatively cute little furry sentient creatures live on Vesk 3, where they led pretty simple agrarian little lives before they were invaded by the honorable, warlike reptilian Vesk. Though the Skittermanders didn't really understand what was happening and just kind of got out of the way whenever a Vesk wandered by with a big old laser rifle. Due to their code of honor, the Vesk couldn't fight the little Skittermanders, so they just told them that the Vesk ruled the planet now, and the Skittermanders were like, whatever you say, boss. The Skittermanders are a playable race with a CR 1/3 Skittermander Whelp and a CR 2 Skittermander stat block in Alien Archive 1, and there are additional player options in the Near Space Guide. There are 2 promo variants of the Skittermander mentioned in the Paizo blog, but we don't have pictures of them. Stay tuned there or to our social media accounts to learn how to get them. And they promise more Skittermanders in future sets. The Swarm is rather like Starfinder's version of the Borg. They're an insectile-like, single-minded collective who move from planet to planet, harvesting and consuming organic material and changing their own DNA in the process to absorb the best qualities of the beings they consume. The Swarm Korvox here has a CR of 3 and can attack you with an organic acid cannon and a psychic assault. Its stat block is in Alien Archive 1, but you can also find Swarm variants in the other Alien Archives. If you like the sound of the Swarm, check out the Starfinder Against the Swarm adventure path. I'm a big fan of the Bantrid race, which scoots around on a little so-called foot orb. They're pretty new to the Pact Worlds in a sense. The planet Liavara has a little moon called Hib that seemed to be completely barren, but yet somehow stunk, so no one really wanted to go investigating it very much. About 5 years ago, machinery in the moon woke up, and the sentient Bantrids came zooming out of their seemingly eons-long slumber to meet their new neighbors. Their whole society is based around movement and speed. You can read more about the playable Bantrid race in the Pact Worlds book, or in the first book of the Devastation Arc Adventure Path, Waking the World Seed. Castrovel is arguably one of the most important and interesting planets in the Pact World system. It's home to 3 key races, the Lashunta, who are a core playable race in Starfinder, the Elves, another core playable race, who in Pathfinder and Starfinder are aliens from Castrovel and not fey creatures, and finally the ant-like Formians, who have a hive mind, a caste system not unlike regular ants, and who serve a queen. They were made playable in Alien Archive 1, which also provides stat blocks for a CR 1/2 Formian Worker and a CR 3 Formian Warrior. These magical beasts have light-producing filaments instead of fur, which they use to silently communicate with each other. They're able to focus a beam of light out of their mouth to attack as if they were using a laser cannon. While their fellow natives of Castrovel call them Tashtari, many off-worlders just call them laser wolves for obvious reasons. This is another creature with harvestable parts that can be turned into usable items detailed in Alien Archive 2, where their CR 3 and CR 7 stat blocks are given. The Kaisar is a plant-like humanoid race that's also native to Castrovel, who find meaning and purpose in preserving the natural environment. While most choose to stay on Castrovel, some have traveled to other endangered areas like the Ice Wells of Abalon. They are also a playable race with stats in the Pact World sourcebook. They are unable to speak and communicate only via telepathy. And if you're going to get trapped in an escape pod, having one as your partner is pretty nifty because they breathe in CO2 and exhale oxygen. So Starfinder is big with the "what if this animal were humanoid and intelligent" idea. The Osharu are the intelligent slugs. Their culture is highly focused on science and enlightenment, often taking to the stars to expand their knowledge. Though they're also quite timid and paranoid, never really wanting to travel alone. They are a playable race in Alien Archive 2 who are quite good at knowledge checks, just maybe don't salt their food. There are additional race options in the Near Space Guidebook. These feline humanoids come from a planet they call Pulonus, but which is officially known as Vesk 6. The Vesk are one of the dominant species that hail from outside the main solar system where the Pathfinder homeworld Galarian was located. The Vesk solar system had a lot of planets with other intelligent races, like the Patra here. While the Patra had inferior technology to the Vesk, they had a long warrior tradition which made conquering them a long, arduous process for the Vesk, unlike what happened with the Skittermanders before. In the end, the Patra signed a treaty with the Vesk and are now part of their empire, which they call the Veskarium. The CR6 Patra Stalker stat block is in Alien Archive 2, and they are a playable race. And you can learn more about them and their planet in the book Near Space, which also has some additional player options for them. While the aforementioned Skittermanders are the dominant and best-known species on Vesk 3, there is another species, a distant cousin of the Skittermanders that's worth discussing. Long ago, the planet was devastated by a disaster, and some Skittermander ancestors retreated underground where they were forced to hunt and compete for increasingly hard-to-find food sources. These creatures evolved into Stridermanders, and when they finally broke through the surface again, they started to hunt the Skittermanders. They're able to camouflage their skin and have a nasty feeding tendril that they can use to hold a target in place while they eat it. Alien Archive 3 has a stat block for a CR3 Stridermander and a CR10 Stridermander Tyrant. One of the planets in the Pact World system is a gas giant like Jupiter. This planet is called Theta, and just like all the planets in the system, it's home to intelligent species. And the Barathus are at the top of that particular evolutionary ladder. They're kind of blimpish jellyfish creatures who are able to rewrite their own genetic code at will depending on the circumstances. This translates mechanically into them being able to take a swift action every 1d4 turns to reinforce their limbs to do more melee damage, to toughen their skin to increase their AC, to strengthen their legs to increase their movement speed, to gain various kinds of energy resistance, or to increase their reach. They are a playable race, and they have a CR2 and CR5 stat block in Alien Archive 1. And if you do like to double dip with your minis like I do, this mini can also be used for one of the Dreamers of Liavara who are descended from the Barathus. I mean, come on, this is what I'm talking about. In a similar way to how casters may awaken animals to make them sentient, the uplifting process takes regular animals and modifies them to increase their cognitive capacity and to enable them to use tools. Bears are common choices for the uplifting process, which also gives them telepathy, by the way. They do still feel the call of the wild, so some may struggle with long-term assignments on ships and space stations. They can be found most anywhere, but small communities have gathered out in the diaspora where many seek to rediscover their origins, as the uplifting process took place sometime during the Gap, which was a time of lost memories and records. Uplifted bears are playable and are detailed in Alien Archive 2, where they have a CR4 Uplifted Bear Avenger stat block and a CR7 Uplifted Bear Constellate stat block. So it's impossible to give you a full accounting of these races in the 30 to 45 seconds that I take for each mini. Dragonkin have a long history in Starfinder and Pathfinder. They show up in the Pathfinder Reign of Winter adventure path. They are from the Pact World's planet of Triaxis, where they often battle with their evil dragon cousins. Beyond having dragon-like breath weapons, they also have an ability to closely bond with another creature, allowing them to communicate telepathically and act together in battle, each taking the higher of their initiative rolls. You can find their stat block and playable race information in Alien Archive 1. And man, isn't this mini just the best? Dragons with lasers. Kasariks were originally just mindless plant creatures that lived on the Pact World's planet of Castrovel, home of the Lashunta and the Formians that we talked about earlier. Their wars bombarded these plants with lots of psychic energy, which uplifted them into these large and formidable plant beasts. When they attack someone with their tentacles, they're able to siphon some of their prey's abilities. Everything from visual acuity to languages spoken to movement abilities to damage resistances to weapon proficiencies and more. This makes them tough creatures to fight in an extended battle, but the upshot is that scientists have been able to weaponize this ability into an adaptive serum that your party may be able to synthesize or purchase. The Kasarik are CR4 creatures in Alien Archive 1. Just like our solar system, there's an asteroid belt somewhere out in the middle of the Pact World system. In Starfinder, it used to be the planet where the Sarkeesian race supposedly hailed from. They have learned how to adapt their body to live in the vacuum of space. Their wings, for example, act as solar sails. They don't necessarily live in space, though. They've created little settlements in the asteroids that are pretty idyllic. They even have these rivers that flow from one asteroid to another through a force field corridor. They are a playable race that's detailed in Alien Archive 1. The Sarkeesian Sniper has a CR of 5. The Shobadna are four-armed nomadic giants from the planet Akiton in the Pact Worlds. They generally keep their distance from the more technologically superior races on Akiton, but will trade with them on occasion, or offer their services as guides, hunters, and mercenaries. They are honorable warriors who are inured to the cold. The Shobad War Leader has a CR of 7. This is also a playable race in Alien Archive 1. Golems are discussed in Alien Archive 2, where you'll get stat blocks for a cybernetic golem and a nanotech golem. They are automatons created by spellcasters that differ from most robots in that they have an elemental spirit bound to them, usually an earth elemental. They follow the orders that they're given, but as their body takes damage, the spirit bound within may start to get a little bit ornery and eventually may go into a rage, destroying everything in sight. The cybernetic golem is a CR8 creature. Interstellar travel is done in Starfinder by essentially plane jumping into a realm known as the Drift, which is a great transitive expanse. Only recently did we learn that some creatures are actually natives of the Drift, including the Garaga Call, an extraplanar predator that feeds on radiation and that can phase through walls. It also has an ability to leech life using that big toothy maw. One appears in the Dead Sun's Adventure Path, and you can also find 2 stat blocks for it in Alien Archive 2, one is CR5, and the Garaga Call Polymath is CR14. Not all swarm entities are the same. They evolve specialized units to serve specific purposes. The Mind Reaper's job is to gather intelligence in the most direct way possible, by impaling a subject through the brain and extracting neural tissue from which it can extract information. The Swarm Mind Reaper has a CR7 stat block in Alien Archive 2, which also describes how the memory extraction process works in game mechanic terms. So most of the planets in the Pact World system are at least ostensibly friendly and reasonably welcoming, but the furthest planet, Octurne, is something else entirely. It's an organic world covered in poisonous gas, and populated mainly by people, and I use that term loosely, who are members of the cults of the Elder Mythos, those who worship Lovecraftian Great Old Ones. The most populous intelligent race on the planet are the Orocorans, who look rather like giant wingless mosquitoes who suck the black ichor out of the planet for sustenance. They are chaotic evil aberrations who revere the planet's ostensible ruler, Karsai the King. You can learn more in Alien Archive 1. A significant part of most Starfinder campaigns is your starship, which you can upgrade over the course of the adventure. We had a few sets of ship minis from a company known as Ninja Division a couple of years ago. There was a set of Pact World ships and a set of Corpse Fleet ships. This time we're getting 3 Veskarium ships plus 2 iconic Starfinder Society ships. One thing to note about the ships in Starfinder is that each one takes 1 hex on the battle map, regardless of how large the ship is. So when it comes to the minis, they aren't exactly to scale in the same way that creature minis are. Let's start with our Vesk ships. The Vesk, again, are the honorable but warlike reptilian race that's a major player in the galaxy, with their own empire outside of the Pact Worlds, though they have, relatively recently, signed a treaty to join together with the Pact Worlds against greater threats. Think of them like the Klingons in Star Trek. Their ships are described as, quote, brutish and pugnacious. The BMC Mauler, a Tier 2 ship from the core rulebook, can be flown with only 1 or 2 people, making them popular with Han Solo types and bounty hunters. Our mid-tier Vesk ship is the Norikama Dropship, which is Tier 8 and is also detailed in the core rulebook. While it's primarily designed to be a fleet transport, it's armed with plasma cannons, coil guns, and a persistent particle beam, making it formidable in its own right. The dropship takes a complement of 5 crew members, a captain, an engineer, a gunner, a pilot, and a science officer. And of course, its expansion bays are decked out with guest quarters for transport. Now we're getting to the big boys. This Tier 16 Colossal Dreadnought has a crew complement of 300 and is armed with huge weapon batteries and hangar bays filled with squadrons of those BMC Maulers from earlier. This is one of the most feared ships in the galaxy, so if you come across one in your travels, you best treat it with the respect it commands. You can find the details in the Starfinder core rulebook. Our next 2 ships are pretty iconic to Starfinder Society players. The Starfinder Society is the organized play branch of Starfinder. It has its own storylines, which are honestly really compelling and fun. 2 ships are made available to the players for many of their Society missions, the first being the Drake here, which is probably the choice for most crews as it's the more capable ship in combat. The Starfinder Society Guide version 1.0 provides the stats for the Drake at several different tiers depending on the mission. The other ship that Starfinder Society players can choose is the Pegasus, which sacrifices offensive capabilities for speed, sensors, and flexibility with multiple expansion bays. The Starfinder Society guide is available for free on Paizo's website, and it's an excellent place to start if you just want to peruse the Starfinder rules without investing any money just yet. You can also download free character sheets and the Starship Guide. These large, dinosaur-like predators are native to the ice world of Abalon, which is primarily populated by robots. Interestingly, an almost identical species evolved on the gas giant planet Najor 6. As you may notice, they have a lot of eyes. Well, their eggs also have a bunch of eyes, which the parents can actually see through. Many scientists would kill to get their hands on some sharpwing eggs and bodies to try to reproduce the optical abilities of the sharpwing, so one day your PCs may find an offer to hunt one for a hefty fee. Sharpwings also appear in the Dead Sons Adventure Path and have a CR8 stat block in Alien Archive 1. Our final Swarm member in this set is the CR10 Swarm Thresher Lord, which is detailed in Alien Archive 1. Swarm members are consistently undergoing genetic upgrades and modifications. They rarely wield manufactured weapons, as they often have biotech just grafted onto or integrated into them. The Thresher Lord attacks from the air with its massive blades that are grafted onto its forearms. It can cut you to pieces, but it can't hold a dessert fork, so I think we know who the true victim is here. Here we have another carnivorous plant creature found on Castrovel or other verdant planets. This lovely predator attracts prey with its lovely blossoms and its psychic abilities, and then paralyzes them with a sweet odor it can excrete, enabling it to more easily consume their prey. And this is another creature that your party can use to craft an item, in this case, a pheromone grenade that can cause anyone in range to become fascinated. The CR4 Vrasine stat block is in Alien Archive 3 and in Starfinder Adventure Path number 1, Incident at Absalom Station. This set has had a winding road to release. The number of figures that was going into the set changed over time, and WizKids decided to pull some of the minis out of the set and release them ahead of time in those set blister packs, Galactic Heroes and Galactic Villains. You can see our review of those in the eye in the corner of your screen now. So all of that means that this booster set has a smaller run of minis than we typically get from your Icons of the Realms or Pathfinder battle sets. There are a total of 32 figures in this set, and each booster box has 3 minis inside instead of 4. That means the boxes are a bit cheaper as well. The MSRP is $14. I know the original plan was to release one Starfinder battle set a year for the time being, so we'll see if that plan sticks. Here you can see all the minis together, the ones from Planets of Peril and the ones from Galactic Heroes and Galactic Villains. One issue that may bother a few folks is that those original blister pack minis came on black bases, while the new ones are on clear bases. I'm personally ready for a Warband pack of Space Goblins if you're listening, Patrick. Now, Starfinder minis have gone through several manufacturers over time as well. Originally, Ninja Division made a couple of sets. Here you can see some of those Ninja Division minis, which were mostly the iconic Starfinder heroes, next to our WizKids minis here. They generally work together just fine, though the Ninja Division minis are a tad larger and the bases they stand on are a fraction of an inch taller as well. But honestly, if these are out on the game table in front of you, that very slight difference in size probably isn't going to be very noticeable. Then we had some unpainted Starfinder minis from Archon Studio. These are pretty awesome sculpts, but they do come on sprues and require a bit of delicate assembly and painting. We actually have a new set of Archon Studio Starfinder minis on the way to us that we'll be showing you soon. Again, they're a bit taller than our Starfinder Battles minis, but when Starfinder minis are in such short supply, we have to use what we can get our hands on. We'll provide links to our full reviews of all these other Starfinder minis in the doohickey down below. Here you can see the distribution by rarity, which is going to be different given that only 3 minis come in a box and there are a total of only 32 figures overall. This time there are only 11 rares in total, though it seems like we still got 3 in every brick, so if our math generalizes out to everyone, you should end up with 2 of one of the large rare minis. In our case, it was the Swarm Thresher Lord. I like to always report about any broken minis we receive, and this set had very few problems on that end. Though one thing I'll mention is that our case had a long delivery time to us due to the big winter storm that went through Texas last week, so I wouldn't be surprised if our case got transported and jostled around a little bit more than usual. Only one mini out of the 96 arrived broken. One of the arms of the little Corvox, Swarm Corvoxes broke off, but I was able to super glue it back on in about a minute. About 3 of the minis had come unglued from their bases, which has been a relatively new problem that we've seen from the last couple of sets from WizKids. Again, if you have some super glue handy, it only takes about 30 seconds per mini to fix that particular problem. Otherwise, everything arrived in pretty tip-top shape. Now with Pathfinder minis, it's certainly easier to bring them over to your D&D games if that's your game of choice, and of course it's a bit harder to do that with Starfinder, but there should be some minis in this set that you can easily bring over to your fantasy games if you want to. For example, adapting all those Castrovillian plant monsters to D&D is very doable, and there is a place for some sci-fi in your D&D games as well. Maybe that's a topic for another day though. But I do recommend giving Starfinder a shot if you dig RPGs and sci-fi. The Starfinder beginner box makes those first steps pretty painless. You can see our review of that in the doohickey down below. And if you want to get a taste of Starfinder lore, I recommend checking out the Amazon, let's call it Echo, so I hopefully don't trigger your home devices. They have a Starfinder game that features Nathan Fillion from Firefly and The Rookie, and Laura Bailey, who you probably know from Critical Role. There are currently 6 episodes, and it's a great introduction to the Starfinder universe. The only real issue with Starfinder minis is that we just don't have a lot of them right now. So if you want to run one of the 8 Starfinder adventure paths out there at the moment, you may need to use a mixture of minis and Starfinder cardboard pawns. And that's a concept I'm perfectly fine with, but I know some folks really prefer to have that sense of consistency at their table. Here are the WizKids minis next to some of those official Starfinder pawns if you do want to mix and match on your gaming table. This set, like all the WizKids Paint a Mini sets, released alongside a premium set. In this case, it was the docking bay with a ground transport vehicle, a trailer, storage containers, and other items that your adventuring party would likely use on their ship or at a landing site or on a space station. We'll have a full review of that set in a future video. Starfinder is an awesome game with really interesting lore. If you want to learn more after watching this video, again, check out our review of that Starfinder beginner box, but also check out our review of the first book of the most recent Starfinder adventure path, Live Free or Die, which should appeal to fans of Firefly. In that video, I interview the author, BJ Hensley, to get the inside scoop on that adventure. And spoiler alert, we'll have a little bit more to share from Miss Hensley very soon here. Many thanks to our sponsor for this video, Hit Point Press, and their Hexbound Kickstarter. Hexbound is a new supplement for 5e on Kickstarter right now for only a few more days. It's all about bringing witchcraft into your 5e games with new witchy subclasses, items, spells, monsters, new lore, adventures, and more. They also have new minis and spell cards. In just a day or two, we're going to be interviewing the head writer on the project, Mr. Antonio D'Amico, to get the full scoop on the project. But if you want to get the best price on this really cool supplement, either in digital format or in hardback, now's the time to do it before the Kickstarter ends. This supplement allows you to take your regular D&D classes like the Monk and the Druid, the Wizard and the Warlock, and give them really unique and robust witch subclasses, and then have your own adventuring party be its own witch's coven and play in any adventure you want or in one of the included adventures in the Hexbound book. Maybe when we get our hands on it, we'll play some Hexbound games live on Twitch. We'll see. For now, backing the Kickstarter through our link in the eye in the corner of your screen or in the doohickey down below helps us by letting Hit Point Press know that we sent you. And that's the #1 thing you can do right now to help us keep making videos. That's Hexbound by Hit Point Press. And thank you for watching today. I hope you're doing well out there. We'll be launching our very own Patreon here very soon. We'll have a video giving you all the details on that pretty soon here. There will be a few limited tiers, so if you want dibs on those, you want to stay tuned here to learn when we launch that Patreon. You can join the conversation on Discord, where the community has been putting together little live painting sessions, which I got to sit in on for just a little bit a couple of days ago. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Liking this video and subscribing to the channel also helps us out a lot. Coming soon, we'll have that review of the Docking Bay Starfinder set, the Hexbound interview, another surprise Kickstarter preview, more Warlock tile reviews, and a review of something that we've never covered before that was a surprise to us as well. So be sure you're subscribed to see all that. But for now, stay safe, have fun, love each other, and I'll see you next time at the Gallant Goblin.